Some of the weapons being poured into Ukraine will inevitably end up on the European black market, meaning we can all look forward to a new breed of military-armed gangs and super terrorists in the next decade. This is Scallan and you're watching Gript Media. Before we start the video, if you want to support Gript and our work, make sure to click like, subscribe and comment, even if you have absolutely nothing to say. Just comment your favorite sport or something. Because by liking, sharing and commenting, this channel will get boosted in the algorithm and get seen by more people. You effectively are our algorithm at the end of the day. So if you want to see this channel grow, just take 2 seconds right now to like, comment and do your part to support independent journalism. And with that said, on to the video. A few months ago, Italian newspaper Il Giornale reported that Western military equipment is already being sold out of Ukraine illegally using the encrypted messaging app Telegram. In addition to Soviet-era AK-47s, weapons sold also reportedly include firearms made in NATO countries such as the American M16 and M4 and the Italian ARX-160A1. And this may prove to be very ominous going forward, especially in light of one recent announcement. Last week, the US announced a $3 billion arms package to Ukraine, the single largest sum yet in a single installment. So far, a total of $9.1 billion in US military aid has been sent to the war-torn Eastern European country, and this is all money spent specifically on weapons. And that's not to mention the billions sent collectively by France, Germany, Italy, Finland, Sweden, Canada, Australia, Denmark, Poland, Norway, the UK, etc., etc. All of these countries and more have sent crates and crates of weaponry worth ungodly sums of money to the Ukraine. You're easily talking about billions of euros worth of rifles, grenades, anti-tank rockets, Stinger missiles, and so on. Even neutral Ireland contributed non-lethal military equipment despite calls from politicians like Neil Richmond to send lethal stuff as well. So in other words, Ukraine is now awash with lethal, state-of-the-art gear. This small country is absolutely armed to the teeth, and no doubt that will help them give Russia a bloody nose. But before we all start popping champagne and clinking glasses, it's worth asking, is bruising Russia the only thing that will happen because of this? Could there be another effect of pouring vast amounts of deadly weaponry into a small and, let's face it, very corrupt country? Bear in mind, I'm not necessarily saying that the West should or shouldn't arm Ukraine, though that's a vital conversation that urgently needs to be had. Not arming Ukraine would also have major consequences, needless to say, not least of which would likely be a swift Russian victory. But before we make a decision one way or the other, we should consider the full ramifications of where this might lead. You see, in life there is a concrete law, a law as strict and binding as the law of gravity or the speed of light. It is ironclad, and if you try to ignore it, it will eventually punish you severely and bring you crashing back down ceremoniously to the earth. And that law, which Western leaders never seem to take into account, is the law of unintended consequences. Every action we take inevitably has knock-on consequences that we didn't anticipate. No matter how carefully you plan an action, regardless of the situation, there are always going to be variables you can't account for, meaning that the things we do inevitably end up causing secondary and tertiary events that weren't planned. Sometimes these consequences are very insignificant and barely noticeable. Sometimes they're much more consequential and serious. But one way or another, there will be an impact of some kind. And the bigger and more drastic your action is, the bigger the unintended consequences are likely to be. For example, Bosnian revolutionary Gavrilo Princip shooting Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand and inadvertently causing the First World War. You shoot one guy and accidentally create a domino effect which goes on to kill 40 million people. Whoopsie daisy. So what could a possible outcome of filling Ukraine with advanced weapons be? Well, we don't actually have to speculate much here. Speaking of Bosnia, something similar happened during the breakup of Yugoslavia in the 1990s. When the Balkan states went to war, they started producing millions of weapons and distributing them far and wide throughout the population. Very similar to what Zelensky has done now with conscription, handing out guns even to violent criminal offenders who have combat experience. However, after the Yugoslavian civil war ended, what happened? Well, now everyone had guns and didn't want to give them back. Meaning you have a situation where today, the Interior Ministry of Serbia estimates there are around 900,000 illegal firearms in circulation within the country. That figure is estimated to be 750,000 in Bosnia and 450,000 in Kosovo, both according to the UN. Serbia has so many illegal weapons that a few years back the government had to put out a PSA urging people not to leave hand grenades in the bin because explosive accidents kept happening. Finding bullets and bombs over there is like finding a 20-cent coin here. The place is lousy with the stuff. So, in other words, the entire region is absolutely full of deadly, untraceable weapons, and naturally, as one might expect, people often end up selling these weapons on the black market for a few quid. This black market finds its way to Europe, and guess what happens then? Well, believe it or not, gangsters, terrorists, and cartels from Galway to Krakow buy them and then use them to create havoc across the continent. This is an ongoing problem even to this day. For example, the deadly Islamist Paris attacks in 2015 killed 135 people and injured at least 416 more. And those attacks were carried out using illegal Yugoslavian Zastava M70 assault rifles. It's a simple fact that most of the weapons used by European organized crime today can ultimately be traced back to the Balkans, and when you think about it, the problem shouldn't even be that bad because the UN had even put an embargo on importing arms into the region to prevent further bloodshed at the time, and yet we're still dealing with the fallout from that era 30 years later. So how much more likely do you think it is that we'd experience similar problems now that billions of euros worth of high-tech gear are being pumped into Ukraine? No doubt some people will sell their weapons under the table, as happened in the Balkans, because Ukraine is the poorest country in Europe, and even more so now after being flattened by a war like this. People will need money fast. In addition, other opportunists will simply scavenge the battlefield and strip dead soldiers and their gear before selling it for a quick buck. Swedish integration minister Anders Ygeman spotted this problem a few months ago, saying there are many weapons from the former Yugoslavia in Sweden that are used by organized crime. We must take steps to control the flow of weapons after the war in Ukraine and also destroy weapons that are no longer needed. He added, the lesson that we've learned from other conflicts is I think you have to pay for those weapons in order to collect and destroy them. And while what he says may be true, by the way, buying the weapons means spending millions or billions of euros on equipment that we already bought, effectively buying the same gear twice. Very efficient, alright. And besides, an unnamed EU official reportedly said that the EU would not be able to prevent the worst excesses from happening. It's hard to avoid weapons smuggling, they said. We try to keep track of them, but I would be lying if I said that we'll succeed. We failed after the war in Yugoslavia and we can't prevent it now. So we've essentially resigned ourselves to defeat on this front. In Ireland alone, many thousands of combat-grade anti-tank weapons were sent to Ukraine from Belfast and may end up in the possession of dubious characters, according to an ex-PSNI superintendent and counter-terrorism expert. Speaking to the Sunday Life, Ken Pennington said that about 17,000 NLAW rocket launchers have been sent to Ukraine, but not tracked, and that he fears smugglers could sell them to groups like dissident Republicans and the UVF, presumably not to mention any other militants across Europe. So all in all, don't be shocked if the next decade is plagued by extremely well-armed terrorists and cartels running around with rifles and grenade launchers, because that's what we're walking into. This outcome was unintended, but it was not unforeseeable. We've been here before, and anyone who knows a little bit about history could have predicted it. If cheerleading for the Ukraine is what we've committed ourselves to, let's at least think long and hard about the consequences through to the end and not be naive about the whole thing. Please like and share this video, and if you enjoyed it, please consider signing up for a monthly donation via the link on screen to help us produce more content like this. Alternative media like Gript needs all the assistance it can get, and every donation goes a long way. As always, thanks for watching.